Peter was chosen by Jesus to be the cornerstone rock. Jesus said Peter would be the rock on which he built his church. Peter was impulsive, for at times he led with heart, without thinking. This sometimes came back on him negatively. Peter was one who testified as to who Jesus was. When Jesus asked all the disciples who Jesus was, Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, that this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by the Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosened in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was Messiah. And in the next conversation, Jesus tells the disciples he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things and fulfill his mission and be raised to life. Now we see Peter's impulsiveness acting from his heart. Peter rebukes Jesus, saying, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." Then Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." It was also Peter who, following the Last Supper, Peter says he will go with Jesus and die with him. And Jesus says, "Peter, before the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times." In the gospel story, we see Peter's impulsiveness, acting with heart before thinking. Jesus went into the hills to pray, and he sent the disciples on across the sea. Now I wonder, did the disciples ask Jesus how Jesus was going to catch up to them on the boat? From Matthew 14:22 through 36. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was long away from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And the 4th watch of the night, between 3 a.m. and 6 o'clock a.m., he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to walk to you on the water." He saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." In Peter's distress, Jesus picked Peter up and into safety. He can have the faith that whatever the size of the storm, we know that Jesus will bring the calm. Peter, throughout this relationship with Christ often picked up Peter in times of distress, but that made Peter even stronger, knowing Jesus' capacity of love, grace, and strength. Peter stepped out of the boat, his comfort zone. A year ago, a new charge began with Ellis, Lacrosse, and Bison. Churches with one pastor. We all, including myself, stepped out of our comfort zones to meet the ministry calls and demands of changing worship times, getting people trained to teach young disciples. Now, a year later, we still need to step out of our comfort zones to do ministry in these times. Maybe it is expanding ways on how to deliver messages at worship. Or maybe exploring new ideas to do ministry. To grow as disciples of Jesus Christ, we need to continue to step out of our comfort zones. Making disciples isn't just making new disciples. When a disciple comes to faith, making of that disciple doesn't stop. It continues on through nurturing and growing our faith through worship, prayer, Bible study, carrying out the Great Commission. Yes, stepping out of the box. Years ago, there was a movie titled First Night. Richard Gere and Sean Connery in the remake of the story Camelot. To earn a kiss from Lady Guinevere, if a knight or brave person has to make it through the gauntlet without falling off or getting hurt. The gauntlet was a machine of different kinds of blades and sharp objects and blunt instruments rotating around, knocking people around off the machine. Richard Gere playing Sir Lancelot in honor to win the kiss of the Queen enters the gauntlet. He moves forward and he keeps his focus on moving forward, stepping forward, sidestepping, turning sideways to make it through the machine. And Sir Lancelot makes it through and he earns the prize. King Arthur praises him and then remarks about his stupidity in going through the gauntlet in the first place. Lancelot led with his heart before he thought through things. But he had the sword and his fighting skills to get himself out of trouble. When we act from our hearts without thinking, it is like getting through a muddy road. Our heart says we can go right through without getting stuck. So we give it our all and we move forward, digging through the mud, and then we get stuck. Then we say to ourselves, this is another fine mess we've got ourselves into. Our thinking could be, let's try this road another time. Or thinking, is there a better way to do this? It's not wrong to show our hearts, but with our hearts and our minds together, we can stay out of trouble as we move forward. The people that were going through that gauntlet in the movie, Lancelot realized that they were knocked off the machine because they backed up. Instead of trying to move forward, constantly moving forward. Our history is a very good tool and teaching tool. And we can reach back and freshen up ideas. But we are in changing times. The country is no longer the way it was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so we are going through these tests, these storms. And if we think with our hearts and our minds together and trust in Jesus Christ, we can move out of our boxes and move forward together. I suggest these plans when we plan ideas for the church. First, pray about it. Second, reveal the activity your heart speaks you to do. Third, think it through and ask yourselves the pros and cons of the activity. Fourth, check your vision with others for their wisdom and sharing of their ideas. And fifth, plan it out. And sixth, again pray for the activity and those helping with the activity, and those to receive the activity, the ministry. Start with prayer, end with prayer. If at first you don't succeed, don't give up. Analyze and discern the activity. Then try it again. Stand on faith in all stages, all steps. Don't be afraid to fail, because this causes us to remain too comfortable, and it gets in the way of stepping out of our comfort zones and gets in the way of growing as disciples of Christ. Remember, we are all in the ministry together. And we can move forward together, stepping out of our comfort zones, reassuring each and every one of us along the way, each step we take. And let us go out in ministry in our communities and world. Amen.